So you have this first big success, and so at that time, I would imagine you have a lot of folks around you that are recognizing you socially. It's an interesting experience. I want to get into the later part of this too, but I think the early part of the story is a good, interesting place to start. So you're getting recognized. You're able to be free and try a bunch of different things, and then you fail twice and hit rock bottom. So can you talk about that part of your life and what that was like emotionally, also socially, why you think, um, one thing I'm curious about too is uh, sometimes businesses fail, but for you personally, even, your financial situation was kind of really severely damaged. So what was that whole journey like? Like what happened from the ascent and then back down?
Yeah, and I'm there's a lot in that journey, but I think the number one thing is sort of around money. So the reason I started that first business was I came from a place of not um, we weren't poor, but we certainly weren't in middle class either. So I came from a family that no one had ever gone to university. Um, that money was always an issue. And so my driving force for starting that business was fear of not having money and fear of being dependent on somebody else for money. And so fear can be a great motivator. It can also freeze other people, just stop and don't do anything. For me, it was this I must find a way to have a different financial situation than my family did. I started waitering when I was 15 to put myself through university to get that nursing degree, realizing in the first year that I was like in the wrong career. I couldn't reverse that. So, this journey of to success, I didn't understand money. I had no learning about money. I had a family that grew up talking and fighting about scarcity of money. And so I had no framework for money. And so looking back, I sort of think I, not sort of think, I didn't feel like I deserved the money. I didn't understand how to manage it. I felt like an imposter. I had made all these big name friends that are millionaires and billionaires, and I'm in this circle of people that I never imagined I would ever be around. I'm in five-star everything. Um, and my brain and mindset couldn't shift yet to this place of abundance. And so I think in many ways I sabotaged as well. So the businesses failed, but they failed almost because my own psyche, my own ego, my own personal insecurities couldn't quite allow me to be where I was. And then the bankruptcy, the embarrassment and shame. Now I'm like all these people that I'd met, and I'd won all these awards, and now I'm like, ah, it's like, oh, this is not good. You certainly learn who your friends are, just like when you go through a divorce, you learn who your friends are. You do when you go through bankruptcy. So anyway, it was a journey of learning about money, I would say, and getting comfortable with money.
When did you start to realize that it was some of these personal issues that were kind of self-sabotaging you? Because was it after you hit rock bottom, or what at what point did you kind of start to realize like this is maybe not, of course there's external factors, but a lot of this is being driven internally as well?
Um, I think I knew even when I started that first business, even as it started to grow, I knew that there wasn't that I was a bit skewed in my thinking about who I was. I was a bit skewed in my thinking about finances. I um, recognized that I probably some of the insecurities I had weren't quite right, but at the same time, you're on a ride and you keep going with the ride. It's doing great. So the real true realization came when the bankruptcy happened, right? Of you really have to self-reflect and really look at yourself, not just the business, and really figure out what is important here. So what really is important was that I was still okay, still healthy, still going for runs, still me. Nothing actually had changed. And my worst fear, which was, fear, money motivated me to get going, and now I've lost it all, was this realization that it's not that bad. Really. All those emotions and embarrassment and stuff, like, really, what did all that mean? And am I going to survive it? Yep. And so that was when I really clued in that I played a big part in how I was viewing myself and how I was viewing money, and how to take a gentler approach to success. Would be a good way to say it.
What do you mean by that? Gentler approach to success?
I was on the hamster wheel. I was so driven to get out of poverty and so driven to never need anybody to support me. So driven to have more through all of that. And that was the driving force. And once you have nothing, you go, oh, okay. All right. Not that bad. And really, why was I trying for so much more? Why was I on this 16, 17, 18-hour work life? For what? What did I actually like in life? What were my things I enjoyed? I loved the wilderness. I loved hiking. I was an adventure racer. I loved being outside and activities and fitness. And so that's where I was happiest. Why was I constantly 16, 18-hour days trying to get somewhere that did I really need that much? Not really, no. No, not to go do what I would love to do, which was wilderness.
It's pretty. I think there's a little bit of a movement now to expose this relationship between just your personal life and how it affects everything around you, because I think it used, or I think it was more common before to think that you can separate these things out, but I think people are starting to come around to the fact that a person's a person. You can't necessarily do some of these things. And what's interesting about your story too is that you actually, even with those things, you actually hit the first like milestone. You actually sold it. You had a great exit. You did it. And so at that point, a lot of people might think, okay, well, you solved the problem because you were worried about poverty. Now you're rich, so it's all good. But in reality, it's like, I guess, even externally, if some of these things get taken care of, you kind of are left with a bit of like a psychological deficit still around that. And then it just like doesn't end until I guess you deal with it on the root level.
You
Um,
got it.
and it seems like you clued into that after the second and the third companies.
Yeah.
So when you hit rock bottom, did a lot of this stuff just like a lot of these realizations just come as you were sitting through it and trying to reflect on it, or did you go see a therapist, or how did this stuff start to make sense to you?
Yeah. And I did, I think I was probably having some realizations all along. And so the final death of the third business was sort of like, okay, all right. It's not the success of the business isn't just because of me, and because your ego gets wrapped in all of this. So the ego blow really makes you clue in that there's so many other multiple factors to what made it successful. But I did in my 20s during the first company. It was wildly successful and growing, but I actually sought two people at that time. I did seek a mental health counselor to help deal with some of the issues of childhood, and a life coach, an executive coach, to try and learn how to be a better, what I thought was leader, but in many ways it was a better human being. And so many of those things that I learned at that time, I started to experiment with in my 30s. And even though I failed, I was learning. And I learned so much in that journey of trying to figure out me. And both those businesses were still about figuring out me. It's all connected back to me. Um, by the time the bankruptcy happened, yes, it had some final pieces to the puzzle, but I was already in that transformation mode.
Yeah.